If you need to like shake anything out or anything like that, feel free to do that.
Okay.
It helps. I don't know. It helps me. Hi. Hello.
Hey.
Welcome back to Intentional Oversharing with me, your host, Neely Kimey. Today, I have a really exciting special guest. Isabel Sterne is joining me. Hi, Isabel. How are you doing today?
Hi. I am just fabulous. How are you doing?
Same. Killing it as usual.
Just great. Everything's great.
No, nothing is wrong at all. Nothing at all in September 2025 in the US. So I have Isabel here. We have like some ideas for what we want to talk about. We'll just see where that leads us. So, Isabel, I would love to give you a second to tell us about yourself. Whatever you want to share about what you do, maybe like how we met, whatever.
Sure.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we met on LinkedIn, wonderful land of LinkedIn. My kind of path to getting active on LinkedIn in the first place is I had been working in marketing for about 15 years, got laid off and decided I was sick of that, cycle of kind of like marketing tends to be cut. So I'd been through a couple layoffs. So I wanted to start my own business. So now I do consulting. So I help neurodivergent founders and coaches show up online in a way that kind of works with their brain and is something that can be sustainable for them and impactful for their business. I found out only 2 years ago that I myself am neurodivergent. So I got assessed as ADHD and autistic, so ADHD. So yeah, it's been a journey and I've been talking about it on LinkedIn as well as some tips about marketing. So it's kind of all come together in this way. And I believe we probably met through a neurodivergent post or something like that.
Yeah, as it tends to happen.
Yeah.
I think that your writing in general like resonates with a lot of people. But also I feel like the timing worked really well too. Like people were craving the authenticity that you were starting to share online and in like a space that people typically it's like you're supposed to only talk about certain things. It's like very like business buttoned up, or people assume that at least. And I just feel like you found like the perfect time, like unintentionally maybe, to just start sharing that. Like, would you agree with my perception of that?
Yeah. And I mean, same with you. That's why I was drawn to your voice as well. Like it just felt more conversational and human than a lot of the voices on LinkedIn. But yeah, that was definitely my experience as well. I was tired of that super formal kind of business voice that you have to put on. And when I found out I was neurodivergent, I was trying to make a conscious effort to like drop that and to just get back to how I naturally sound and like I really value humor, so I wanted to make sure to use that and just like make it feel more genuine than these business posts where everyone's talking about 10 times in your revenue and whatever. Like I just wanted it to feel like me.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So, what we wanted to talk about today, Spidey senses, what that means for us in the context of being autistic, in the context of ADHD, if we want to go there. But I also want to follow this train of thought that popped up as you were speaking. So, yesterday, I went to a PFLAG meeting. By the way, if anybody listening has never heard of that, it's a local support group. There are chapters all over the country, and it's for like gay and lesbian and like queer people to meet with other queer people, but also like allies are invited to join and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of overlap between like the queer and the neurodivergent communities. So there's an autistic guy that is part of this organization, and he was in the meeting. And he brought up that he and his friends back in college would have like what they call box talking. And he explained that there were certain like social media or communication platforms designated for specific things. So like he would have a way to chat with like his roommate in the context of like talking about their roommate situation, but then they would talk only about roommate stuff in that setting. And then on
Interesting.
Facebook, yeah, like on Facebook, they would talk about like what's going on in life. His roommate would invite him to like parties and stuff on Facebook, but then they would go on Discord and they would like only talk about like gaming there. So there was like
Mm,
these like rules that didn't have to be outlined, and you knew that you could speak about those certain topics in those certain contexts. And I just thought that that was really interesting. And I just am curious if you've experienced the same thing. Let me explain why my train of thought. I thought about this because of the LinkedIn thing. And there's like this context of
mm,
LinkedIn being professional and business oriented. And you and I
mm-hmm,
have kind of shown up and like shook that up in a certain way that I think people find refreshing. But yet,
mm,
I've also had people push back on me about that because they're like, no, this is supposed to be for this.
what?
What are you doing?
Uh-huh. Like,
Yeah.
this is not Facebook.
Yeah.
That's very much a real thing. And I kind of think of, did you see Severance?
Yes.
I don't
Well, I
know.
saw the first season.
Yeah, well, it sort of reminds me of that whole idea of like, okay, you can only bring your severed like work self to LinkedIn, and that's the only type of voice that will allow here. And like, that's just so weird to me. I don't know. I just like can't do it anymore. Yeah. It's not a real way to build relationships because I don't know if you've ever worked in a workplace where it's like, if you're only interacting with someone's like work self, it feels like you never really know them. And that is weird to me. I fully can see how LinkedIn has sort of become like this certain tone and only certain topics are allowed to be talked about. And then probably those same people go over to Instagram and are posting like memes and a completely different person. So I've definitely seen that for sure.
Yeah. And I can understand why, like, maybe an autistic brain would really like the predictability of that. But I know that I can speak for myself with this, that I don't want to have specific masks that I wear depending on what
Mm,
platform I'm
right.
on. I don't want to like have to switch between like almost like code switching. I don't want to do that. It doesn't feel good, and it's like replicating this like conditioning that I've been taught throughout my life. I'm trying to leave that behind. Not saying that like I need to unmask in every situation, but yeah, I want to push back against that expectation.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea too, because I think you're hitting on like, we do that kind of, a lot of us who were masking for a lot of our lives, like, not even, I didn't even know I was masking. I was just like, okay, everyone acts this way, at school. You can act differently at home. You can act differently at work. That's just like what everyone's doing, which I think is true to an extent. But I think if you're neurodivergent, it's like probably a little extra. Um, and so, yeah, that the way that we built our online worlds to kind of like mimic these dynamics, it's like we have the opportunity now, actually, since we're all spending more time online, to build worlds that are more like you actually bring your whole self, to all these channels instead of doing that kind of like masking that we kind of do in person sometimes.
Thinking of it in that way, we had the chance to like build these worlds and these different areas to act a certain way. And then we as humans chose to put ourselves in these boxes. It's just very
Mhm.
telling and
Mhm.
interesting. You and I have talked a lot about this idea of like Spidey senses, which I noticed you put it in those terms when talking to me about it. But what do you mean when you refer to like your Spidey senses?
Well, it means different things in like different contexts and situations, but it could be I think a lot of it is pattern spotting. Like if you've been kind of burned by someone or something in the past and you start to see a similar pattern happening, I think that can tend to trigger those spidey senses. And sometimes it's not even logical. Like sometimes it's just like I feel off and I can't even explain why. Intuition, I guess, is another way to think of it. But yeah, just kind of a sense that something is off, I would say. And I've learned over time that those are usually going off for a reason and who actually listen to that sooner rather than later because when I was younger, I would make everything have to fit some logical reason, like they're acting this way because XYZ or whatever. I would try and explain it to the point that I was really kind of dismissing my own needs, and putting myself in a worse and worse situation. So I think it's that sense of like listening to your intuition and just trusting it without having to explain it too much to yourself.
I personally like that using this term like Spidey senses, I feel like it kind of covers more than just if we were to talk about it in the context of like intuition or like trusting your gut. I think of a very specific feeling when I think about listening to my intuition or trusting my gut. And that because we're conditioned not to trust our own perception of things from a young age, usually for most of us, we can lose touch with our intuition because there's all this confusion that's brought in when we aren't trusting ourselves or we've been taught not to trust ourselves. But the Spidey senses, it's like, first of all, I can kind of interpret that how I need to based on the situation. There's not as much of like a clear like line to what that might be referring to, but it could be something as simple as, oh, that's a red flag. Like, why does that seem like a red flag to me? Is it pattern recognition? Has this happened before? Or like in our bodies somewhere where it's like, hey, wait a second, something isn't right here. I'm not exactly telling you like run away. Your body doesn't exactly know what you should do about it, but just keeping that in mind, paying attention to anything else that happens that maybe shows that that showed up for a reason. And usually
Mm,
it did. Like, that's
mm,
something that I've noticed about myself. I do actually have a very close relationship with my intuition. I feel like I'm a very intuitive person. I have had to show myself over and over again that I was right before I
mm.
actually pay attention to those signs, before I get burned. So, yeah, I'm wondering if you also had to go through this kind of negotiation almost with yourself. And then how do you know when it might be your anxiety that's showing up, rejection sensitivity that's showing up, versus whether it's like an actual red flag that you should pay attention to?
Ugh, yeah, I mean, I think it also depends on the situation. Like, if you're at work,
Yeah.
if you work in a workplace and you're getting spidey senses and red flags, there's sometimes only so much you can really do about that. Like, you can't walk away from work. You kind of have to like work through that and sort of, yeah, deal with that in its own way. If it's someone who, like, I met on LinkedIn or something and I get a spidey sense and like I never have to engage with them again, like LinkedIn's a big place, then like I can walk away from that. So I think like there's different scenarios of like how much do you even really have to work through it? I think that's kind of where I've gotten. Like if I'm getting a red flag and I don't have to like stay in the situation and the stakes aren't very high, then like I usually just trust my intuition on that. I think something that's confused me though is I've tended to like over intellectualize a lot of interactions in general. I think being like autistic and ADHD, and I think you did a really good post about this. You sort of end up gaslighting yourself a lot of your life because people say, oh, you misinterpreted that, or you were acting weird in this way. And so you're kind of constantly intellectualizing interactions. So that's kind of my natural state a lot of times. But I would say in most like healthy relationships, I don't walk away like questioning things that much or feeling like weird about something too much. Like if it's a safe relationship. So I think a red flag and something I've started to pay attention to is if I keep walking away from a conversation and questioning a lot of things, that to me is like a red flag enough to like, step back.
Bringing up the intellectualizing makes a lot of sense because so many of us do that. We get super into learning about things, astrology or human design. I really like that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's personality tests. Sometimes we get a degree in psychology, like just so we can understand how people work. And so that's also another kind of way of intellectualizing and trying to put people into boxes that are more, we can more easily understand. I think that also what you were saying about just like noticing when certain people or certain situations don't make you question yourself. If we are so used to questioning ourselves, and that's happened to us our entire lives, and we do the gaslighting of ourselves, other people gaslight us and try to convince us that we're crazy or we're being dramatic or we're too sensitive, then we have to get to a place where we even consider, oh, maybe all of that is bullshit, first of all. Like maybe I've been right all along. I think that for a lot of us, the reality is that our intuition was right and that our perception of things tends to be right, no matter what the context is. Just actually getting to a place where we can be like, okay, wait a second. Maybe all of this conditioning isn't serving me. Like maybe me not trusting myself is actually not helping. And then being able to pay attention and recognize those relationships that are actually fulfilling you and also just making you feel like, oh, maybe I can trust myself more than I was giving myself credit for. And we don't always have those relationships.
Do you have anything that happens with you, like when you feel like your spidey senses are going? Do you have like some sort of body sensation or mental process, or what does it feel like for you?
So I'm gonna end up talking a little bit about human design here, because this is what has helped me conceptualize this a lot, especially in the last year or so since I've been learning about it. So there's something in human design that, to me, this is one of the most useful aspects of human design, and it's what's called the not self theme. It's tied to your aura or your energy type in human design. I'm not going to get like in the weeds about all of that, but your not self theme is an emotion that typically is like a recurring theme throughout your life, and it is an emotion that shows up when something in your life isn't in alignment for you. Um, so it could be a person, it could be a situation, it could be a potential like scenario, it could even just be like a job that you're going after and like applying for or something like that. Um, and it brings up this emotion. So for me, I'm a manifestor in human design. So that means that my not self theme is anger. The other not self themes in human design are frustration, disappointment, and bitterness, depending on like what your human design type is. Mine's anger. And when I first was learning about this, if you would have asked me like, would you consider yourself an angry person? I would have immediately been like, oh no, not at all, because we're also taught to like suppress certain emotions. That's part of our conditioning, and it's not okay to be viewed as a feminine person and also be angry. So I would be like, oh no, like that's not me. But whenever I actually think about it, this is a recurring theme that's happened throughout my life, and it shows up the most and the strongest when something is out of alignment. There was a woman who I was partnering with last year, and we had agreed on like everything I was going to help her with. And it was all stuff I was capable of, all fine and good. And then as soon as she started asking me for those things, I noticed that anger would show up. It seemed random. It was like, I can handle this request. It's not that
Mhm.
that's outside of my abilities or that it's too much for me to take on right now, but I'm angry and I didn't understand why. But then every time she would ask me to do something, I would feel that feeling, and it was like undeniable. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who knows a bit about human design, and she was like, well, isn't your not self theme anger? And you're noticing this anger showing up every time you even like interact with this
Mm.
person,
Mhm.
even though it seems misguided, it seems misdirected, and it seems like she's not doing anything to like warrant this response. It's still coming up for you. Maybe this just isn't in alignment for you, and it doesn't have to make sense yet why that is. And I really was appreciative of her framing of that. And it's interesting because that feeling has shown up since then. I ended up quitting that role, and I felt immediate relief after quitting it. So that was a sign that it was the right thing to do. And then I've had other opportunities and other people that have come through my life since then where every time we interact, I'm fucking pissed off. I'm like mad. I'm like, get away
Yeah.
from me. And they're not saying anything overtly that warrants anger as a response, but I'm just like, something about this isn't sitting right with me. And so for me, that's been a huge indicator that alarm bells, red flags are happening. I don't have to necessarily understand why it's not in alignment, but I have to like get to a point where I trust myself that that feeling is real and I need to probably act.
I wonder if you're picking up on like manipulative language. Like you're probably picking up on something that's causing you anger. It'd be interesting to pay attention to that and see if you're noticing common patterns when that happens. Because I know for me, that's like when I sense someone's trying to be manipulative, I get so angry. Like I'm done. I think there's a lot of different kind of patterns you can recognize in a lot of interactions that probably would elicit that kind of emotion.
And that's a really good point because there were some things that were kind of strange that would come up in the way that me and that person in particular would interact. And I felt like she was kind of dismissive about certain things that maybe she thought was silly, but to me, they were important to me or things
Mm.
like that. And I was like, well, I don't like how that feels. I could go deep into dissecting a bunch of different relationships with that. But I think that you're right that it can kind of boil down to like a pattern recognition thing. You're not even fully aware that that's what you're doing, but you're noticing. I've seen and heard this kind of stuff before and it didn't go well.
I get that with marketing, like, because I know all the marketing tricks because I worked in marketing. So if someone's like saying my name a lot while like pitching me, I'm like, I know you got this from like ways to make friends and influence people. Like I know your tricks that you're trying to do on me, and it makes me more like resistant and angry because I know that you're manipulating me in a sense. So yeah, kind of. And since you have a psychology background and are emotionally intelligent, you probably pick up on a lot of little things that probably add up in certain situations.
I think you're right. And I think that as autistic people in general, even if you don't have language or education to help you discern when there's manipulation going on or things like that, we're very sensitive to shifts in energy. We might not even be able to pinpoint exactly what it is that's going on, but we're just like, ooh, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way that you said that. Or like,
Mm,
and then we don't want to like jump to conclusions about people's intentions because people jump to conclusions about our intentions all the time and they always get it wrong. But
mm.
I just think whenever the reverse is happening, usually we're right more often than not.
I wish. I wish I wasn't right.
Right?
I think it's just made me a lot, sadly, I think it's made me a lot more cautious about dealing with people. I think when I was younger, I kind of felt like, I think we tend to project our own worldview onto other people and think like, well, we're operating in this way or interacting in this way. So other people must be operating in a similar way. And the older I get, the more I realize, wow, there is such a diversity in brains and in experiences and different approaches people take to conversations. Um, and so I would say a little more guarded now, unfortunately, just because I've kind of gone through being burned in a lot of situations by being overly trusting of people at first. I wish that wasn't the case, but I don't know. How has your experience been in terms of like being able to like trust people when you first meet them?
So I feel like whenever I first was learning about neurodivergence, specifically in the context of ADHD and autism, I think that I just really wanted to believe neurotypicals were the problem because that would just make things easier, right? If I could just put them in a box and be like, avoid the neurotypicals. First of all, I don't have a problem with neurotypicals, like in general. I just want to say that. But I think that my brain just wanted to like simplify um the types of people I was interacting with. And I was like, at least if I surround myself with a bunch of other neurodivergent folks, there's a likelihood that they're going to understand me on a certain level, that they maybe like are less likely to try to put me in a box or to try to expect some sort of mask, like a specific mask from me or whatever. And I would say that like largely that has been the case. I'm mostly surrounded by neurodivergent people in some way, shape, or form, whether that's online or in real life. And it does help me to feel seen more often than not. But the downside to me kind of having that like rigid thinking around neurotypicals versus neurodivergence was that I went into these relationships already giving people a lot of the benefit of the doubt. And so when those red flags would show up or when my brain would notice like some manipulation, I was even more ready to shoo that away and be like, oh, you're being dramatic. Like, this is someone that's part of your community. Like,
Mm, mhm.
they would never do that. Spoiler alert, they will.
Yeah. Mhm.
They absolutely will. And I also just wanted to point out what you said earlier about like the different stakes that we're faced with relationships. If you notice red flags at work, that doesn't mean that you can just quit your job on the spot and go find a new, like, healthier situation. It's not that simple. But I think too that sometimes, especially like, I'm going to put this in the category of autistic brains, but it could apply to many people. I think that our artistic brains, we want to place all of our relationships on the same level or assume the same amount of stakes for all of them. For example, if I have someone who maybe has been interested in hiring me as a coach, I might give them more benefit of the doubt or be more patient with them or
Mhm.
assume the best intentions from them because I'm like, oh, cool, this could be like a mutually beneficial relationship at some point. I want to foster this or whatever. But like, even if someone could be a potential client, if they are making those alarm bells go off for you, or if they're being manipulative, or if they're being whatever, that doesn't mean that they need to be in your life. I would much rather lose out on a few $100s working with a potential client than to deal with a bunch of maybe emotional distress from them
Mm.
manipulating me or hurting me in some way. There are absolutely varying stakes with these. And for sometimes, if you just want to block someone and literally never hear from them again, that
Mhm.
can save you so much stress.
I guess, like, the flip side of it is, like, yes, it's so easy to kinda walk away from situations, and I think I tend to do that sooner rather than later these days, but I guess on the flip side of that, there is always the worry of, like, is this kind of a trauma response? Am I just, cutting it off because, um, I had a red flag and it's not really based in the reality? So those are questions that I ask myself, but then it's like, I'd rather be safe than sorry in most cases. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's the other side of it all is sometimes maybe it makes you more prone to cut things off before you've really fully explored them.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's the argument that I hear most often. I think we can tie that too back to things like rejection sensitivity, like maybe not necessarily you fearing rejection because you're the one that's cutting the other person off, putting yourself in their shoes. What if they didn't mean anything by what they said? I know that I can sometimes start to spiral about like how my actions could have affected somebody else. But then at the same time, I don't know. I just think that protecting your peace above all else is so important. And I feel like the main times that I've ever maybe reconsidered blocking someone, like on LinkedIn, we'll say, for example, it's been, it hasn't been because I've actually wanted to repair a relationship with them. It's been because I want to like, oh, I didn't report them before I blocked them. And now they're just going to run rampant and do a bunch of fucked up shit to
Mm.
other people, you know?
Mhm.
And so I'm like, oh, maybe I should unblock them so I can like stop them
Report.
from doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And also when people block me, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, we weren't right for each other. And that has to be okay. It has to be. Everybody will live if I don't communicate with this specific person. There's 8 billion more people that I can interact
Mhm.
with.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
when you are thinking of this in terms of, oh, is this just like a trauma response or was it like my anxiety that made me do this? Like, how do you reconcile that?
I don't. I don't know. I think it's just like you're never going to know for sure about anything when it comes to people, is what I think. Like relationships, people, everyone's like changing all the time. Everyone's coming at things with their own experiences. So I guess what I've realized is I'm never going to know with 100% certainty if this person was like being manipulative or I should have, blocked this person or whatever it is. It's just you have to at some point listen to your gut and trust it and go with it and like let the chips fall where they may kind of thing. And that's just how I've approached it at this point because yeah, then you can just get into this spiraling and you'll never really have answers, there just isn't a way to find out what is going on in someone else's head ever. What are your thoughts on it these days?
I mean, kind of similarly, and I think also it's worth pulling into this conversation just the gender dynamics as well. I'll say, like, people that are assigned female at birth, we are taught to give people like all kinds of grace. And we're taught, don't be too dramatic, don't be too like gossipy, don't be too this or that, or we're being too sensitive or whatever. The reality is that there are going to be more scenarios that someone like us encounters, especially online, that throw up those red flags for us in ways that I'll say men aren't going to be encountering, or it's not going to hit them in the same way. Because usually for us, it's like when somebody starts to get weird or maybe kind of creepy, then it's like a safety issue. But the worst thing I can do to someone who identifies as male, I don't know, is like annoy them, be too loud and obnoxious or something, like more than they would like. They're probably not going to fear for their safety. And so I wonder what your experience has been with that online.
In those cases, it's like an immediate block. If it's like a blatant harassment, I don't. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think most of the time you can tell when it's that. I mean, I have seen men actually post on LinkedIn like messages from women trying to, I don't know, hit on them or whatever it is. And maybe they could cause harm. I don't know. But yeah, you're totally right. Like being, a woman online is, it's a whole other set of issues. I think more vulnerable also just to be visible, even like just to like post a video or a photo or whatever, because there is kind of that added um, layer that happens.
I feel like it definitely isn't just a gender thing. I think that we naturally are going to encounter those scenarios where we feel unsafe more often. And then
Mhm.
that also can like make us a little bit more intuitive.
For the most part, if they're not like overtly being creepy, I try and assume best intention because I do think like, you know, sometimes people get called out for being creepy when they're not really being creepy. Like
Yeah.
sometimes that does happen. And online communication can be hard to decipher because you can't see body language, you can't like tell the tone. So sometimes stuff does get miscommunicated. So I think a good approach is if you feel like someone's being creepy, just be like, "Can you clarify what you mean?" and just try and dig a little deeper and block them if you notice it's kind of crossing a line.
Yeah. That just makes me think about how approaching things with curiosity in general is that's going to bode well for us in most scenarios. If you don't feel like someone is being overtly manipulative, or if you aren't sure that you can actually tell what is going on there, you can ask people.
Mhm.
You can
Yeah.
just straight up ask them, like, what are your intentions when you say this? It reads as this to me. How did you
Mm.
mean it? You
Mhm.
know? And if someone like jumps down your throat because now you're questioning them or something, well, maybe your intuition was right. And that isn't
Mhm.
something like it's not going to be worth having that conversation with them. Have there been scenarios where you like were getting red flags about someone and then you asked where they were coming from and were able to repair things?
I've asked and it's been a red flag and it hasn't been repaired. So, like, I mean, I have asked for clarifying questions. I think you're so right, though. Like, clear communication usually solves most issues. And I think that that was a big problem I had kind of growing up and in the workplace is everything was so kind of just vague all the time, and so many issues were caused by vague communication. So I'm at the point now, I think now that I know I'm autistic and I know I'm ADHD and I know how I communicate, I don't care. I'll just straightforwardly like ask you straight out, like, what are you thinking? Why did you ask that? This is how I interpreted it. Like, I would rather over communicate in those sort of situations than have it blow up or have it be like festering or have me spiraling. So it's always easier if you are comfortable to just ask directly.
Yeah, it can take some practice of, like, trying that and seeing if it
Mhm.
goes okay, um, because that can be, like, scary. That's another thing we're conditioned not to do is don't be too blunt, don't be too direct. It's, like, off-putting or whatever, but I've tried to reframe that, especially in recent years, as, like, just, like, adult communication.
Mhm. Yeah, like saying what you mean? What?
Like, I'm not the one in the wrong here by being honest.
I do think it's a really good approach with if you're talking with other neurodivergent people who like value truth and honesty and whatever. I think usually if you ask them kind of what their intention is behind something, they'll be honest with you and tell you. And like it might not mean that you um, agree with where they're coming from, or maybe you still feel like manipulated in some way. But I think like that is a benefit typically of interacting with other neurodivergent people who value honesty and truth is you can have those direct communications in a way that you might not be able to with like a more neurotypical person.
Yeah, very true. That's definitely been my experience. And like the times whenever I've had to have difficult conversations with people, I've had to like remove people from my Discord server and things like that. And it hasn't always been able to be repaired, and that's okay. But there have been times where I've, like, even been able to, like, remove someone from my server and just be like, "Hey, I can tell that these topics that are being talked about a lot are upsetting for you, and so I removed you because I didn't want you to be upset." But that doesn't mean that, I still want you to find a place that you feel safe in and that you feel, like,
Mhm.
comfortable in, and I was
Right.
able to, like they were able to be like, "Well, I just wanna be able to still communicate with you, like, even if I'm not in your server, can I still DM you if I wanna talk to you or have questions?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, that door is still open. I can sever a tie or set a boundary, and it doesn't have to mean that, like, now I'm a horrible person, they hate me, it's all over."
Yeah.
Like, most
Right.
of those times, they'll tell me, "Oh, I really appreciated how direct you were being, because otherwise I wouldn't have gotten what happened."
I think that that's a really good way to look at it because I think in the past I've tended to have that very e- sort of extreme thinking where it's like they either love me or they hate me or like there's no in between. But yeah, you can kind of end things and wish the best for other people, but just not engage with it anymore. So I think that's a very healthy approach
When it works out, it
when
can
it
be
works
really
out.
nice. Not a guarantee, but, you know.
Right.
Okay, well, so excited that you were able to join me for this,
Yeah.
Isabel. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you sharing some of your experiences and your insight, and I wanna just give you a chance, if you would like, to, like, share how people can find you, like, plug anything that you might wanna plug.
So you can find me. I'm most active on LinkedIn. That's basically my only social platform. Isabel Sterne, Stern with an E at the end. Also on Substack. My Substack's called Cringe Letter, so you can sign up there and follow me there. And you can also work with me. I offer one-on-one consulting. I offer like LinkedIn profile redesigns, personal brand design. So happy to help anyone who's looking to launch a business, rebrand, or anything like that.
Awesome. And I will share those in the description. Thank you so much for your time, Isabel. And it was
Yeah.
wonderful to have you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I had fun.